Chris, what are you reading?
I can't read. Jasper left this book behind.
Matrix Hack. That's very interesting.
Illusion of Our Reality. It's like a conspiracy book. What if everything is an illusion? What if everything's not real? It says, this is the book you must not read.
So don't read it then.
Well, I have to. It told me not to, so of course I'm going to.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's Kerry Lambert from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. Of course, I'm not in Mirror, Alberta. I am in my basement here in Northwest Calgary. And my co-host here, I can call you co-host.
Mm-hmm. Sidekick? I thought it was your sidekick.
You can kick me in the side later. Christopher Scott, obviously in Mirror, but not at the Whistle Stop Cafe there either. You were in your...
Yes, I'm at home. I was actually enjoying the weather today and thinking about all the enjoyment I'm going to have doing all the summer chores. And I was working on my lawnmower and all sorts of things. And I looked at my phone. I thought, oh, geez, we got something to do. Kerry, you and I are both really, really, really busy these days. And we don't get to do many episodes of the Chris and Kerry Show right now. So when we do take time to do one, it's because it's important. And
it's very important. Yeah.
Someone has something to say, and there's some questions that need answers or something like that. So thank you very much for joining us on this most important of days or episodes of the Chris and Kerry Show.
This has definitely been the number one. No, I'm going to say the whole chemtrails versus contrails episode was definitely number one. But this is a very close number two of requests by our viewers to try and find out exactly what's happening in municipal politics and with especially what's been going on in the town of Chestermere. Mm-hmm. And as many of you, our viewers, do know, I ran as the MLA candidate for the Independence Party in Chestermere and Strathmore last May. And this was, I'm going to be quite honest about the story that I know. And then we're going to get into, we have a couple of counselors here that will come on, and then we'll have Jeff come on and tell a little bit of the story that was going on. This is the story that I was told when I was running as an MLA that I probably shouldn't really be looking into. Number one, because chances are I wasn't going to win the MLA anyways, just because I was running for an independence party. We had Take Back Alberta. If you put your mindset back into May of last year, Take Back Alberta had done a really great campaign saying that if you vote for the UCP, you are guaranteed that the NDP will not make it in. And so essentially that's what the majority of people in Chestermere and Strathmore did. They voted, I think it was more than a 2-to-1 margin over the NDP for the UCP to get in. And it was amazing too how after the fact, after the election happened, when people did come up and say, you know what, Kerry, I would have voted for you, but I was told that the UCP is definitely the way to go. So that's kind of where we're at now in looking at some of the stuff. We are almost a year in after the election. We have had promises made to us by our premier and by our ministers, as well as our elected officials. And a lot has happened in that year. Of course, most people here will know that I do the Alberta Prosperity Project webinars every Wednesday. And even
it's Wednesday.
It is Wednesday, and so my AI version is doing the other one. And we're actually re-showing one on policing because it's such an important part of this puzzle. And as you know, the Alberta Prosperity Project advocates for a lot of different pieces, pension, policing, immigration, employment insurance. And what's the last one, Chris? Hurry up. That's quiz for you.
I wasn't listening to you. I was just going to say, rather than listing them off, what they're advocating for is Alberta to take back every piece of sovereign jurisdiction that the provinces have.
Absolutely.
Immigration, policing, pension, tax collection.
That's the big one. That would be the next big one. So coincidentally, and of course, I'm on the Alberta First Pension crew, which has been going around all over the province here, spreading the message on why an Alberta pension would be a great idea rather than sticking with the CPP. We have a lot more control, et cetera, et cetera. And the day that that Jeff Colvin and company were doing their Calgary presentation at the Riviera was the day we were actually doing our presentation in Chestermere about the pension. So very coincidental. So we, Jeff and I have crossed paths, but not officially crossed paths, because we have yet to have a conversation back and forth. And that's kind of what the point of this was, that what a better opportunity in order to do that than on a Chris and Kerry show, and actually try and get to the meat of the matter in terms of, I've watched, as many of you probably have watched a lot of what's been transpiring with Jeff Colvin and the councillors. And they've been kind of going all over Alberta, as well as doing different podcasts. And the thing that's most noticeable to me is there's definitely some sort of corruption. At least it appears to me. However, the message really seems to be coming just from Jeff and the councillors telling their story. And of course, if you do watch our shows and our webinars, podcasts, you do know that we like to ask a lot of questions. So that's kind of where I'm hoping that this will go, is that we'll be able to get these guys on, talk to them, and maybe get some of the answers that you may be requesting as well. So please, if you do have some questions, put them in the comments. Put 3 question marks before. That way it flags it, and we'll be able to at least address those questions as they become known. Anything else you want to follow up with that, Chris?
Well, I just want to say, like, from my perspective, I've seen a lot of people say a lot of things.
Yeah.
And people can get up and get in front of a crowd and say anything they want. And I've seen lots of people wind crowds up and get them going without ever being able to back up what they're saying. And so, you know, I've heard parts of Jeff's story and the other counselor's story, and I don't really know anything about how they back these things up or any of the backstory to it. So for me, it's more, I want to learn more about this, because it's obvious that there is a problem. And if we're going to solve a problem, any problem, whether it's anything to do with government or anything to do with the sky, we first need to find out, we need to identify what the actual problem is. And from there, we can work on solving it. So that's where
You're right. And that's one of the things that, you know, as we talk about the Alberta Prosperity Project, if we were to become our own sovereign country, if you wanted to call it that way, or at least work within the confines of what's happening here in Canada.
Yeah, the first one's better. Thanks.
We would definitely have to have some solutions so that this doesn't happen again. And it doesn't, you know, a lot of people will think that, well, what does that mean in terms of how it would work in Canada? Does it just, or how it
and what happened?
Yeah, would it just end up being that so instead of calling our premier, she is now the prime minister? No, we'd have a whole new set of rules. But what we need to do is to basically spell out those rules from the ground up. And going through these sorts of issues, corruption, calling out, these are the stories that we need to know so that they don't happen again in basically a new Alberta. So does that make sense, Chris?
It kind of makes sense. In a nutshell, I would say, regardless of what we do going forward as a society or a country or a province or whatever, the most important thing, the number one most important thing, is that people start to understand that civic engagement is critically important.
Absolutely.
We're in the situation we are now at every level of government because we have not been engaged and taking care of our civic duty. And when we don't do that, then all of a sudden the lunatics can take over the asylum, and now they're running the place, right? So we need to make sure that no matter what happens, no matter who's elected, no matter what's going on, we pay attention, we are informed, we're educated, and we use our democratic voices in the best way possible.
Yeah. And so with that, I'd like to call on, that sounds so formal. I'd like to call upon, just have Stephen Hanley and Blaine Funk come on up here and explain to our viewers who you guys are. Welcome to the Chris Kerry Show.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks for coming on. And you know, we're a very informal bunch here, so you know, I'll very often swear, so don't hold that against me. But sometimes just normal English language just doesn't compel the emotion that we're all running into. So with that, let's start with Blaine. Blaine, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in Chestermere and being a councillor.
Before that, sorry, I got to interrupt. I just want to let folks know Jeff isn't on yet. Jeff Colvin, the former mayor, isn't on yet. He's just had a couple things come up, so he'll be on in about 15 minutes or so. So we're just gonna have a chat with Blaine and Stephen before Jeff joins us.
Excellent. Thanks.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
That was good.
Yeah, no problem. I am. I'll give a little bit of background of who I am and what I've done and stuff. So my background, I'm an engineering technologist by schooling. Went out after school and did about 12 years or so of engineering, design, drafting, mechanical design, packaging design. For a while, did that. Jumped into aircraft parts sales, purchasing and stuff for about a year, just as a little sideline gig, and then went back into engineering. But then after that, I went into supply chain, kind of a complete change. Took my technical knowledge and went into the supply chain side, and I managed the material requirements for the CF-18 avionics for a private company, for Raytheon. At its peak, we were managing about $750 million worth of assets. And that's in last few years, I've been bouncing around doing purchasing management, material management, planning, things like that. So politics.
So you're not a regular politician then?
No, this is my first term. I did run in the previous term, but I didn't make it in that one. It was not successful. And then, so this was my first term in council, in politics. Really only got into it because living in Chestermere, I've lived here for, actually I lived here in the early 90s. My mom and dad built a house on the golf course when it really was just residents on the lake. And the golf course, it was very small. At the time, it was a hamlet. And then from there, we've gone from being a hamlet in 30 years to being a full-grown city. So I moved out here about 16 years ago, raised my family. And over that time, you could see that it looked like there was a lot of overspending and things that I didn't like. Our taxes tripled. Quadrupled. They went up a lot. In 1 year alone, they went up 300%.
Exactly.
That hurt. Then we ran into issues with our utility company. So the city at one point spun off the utilities into a separate corporate or wholly owned subsidiary. Stephen will explain it way better when he comes up and does it. I'll leave most of that for him. But what we did see, and what I saw, is our rates and stuff were going through the roof. Every year there was significant 8-10% increases in utility rates year over year. And it just, none of it made sense. The previous term, they had done a 5,500 residents signed a petition asking municipal affairs to look into the utility company and the council. From that, municipal affairs came down and did nothing. So, and that was 5,500 residents.
And the utilities
voting residents.
Was the utilities
at the time?
Was the utilities just electrical, or was it water? Was it sewer? Like, to explain how
water and sewer.
Water and sewer.
And it's all water, sewer, garbage. So, but most of the services are all coming from Calgary. So they're really just a flow through contract that we have for water and sewer from Calgary. So there's very little to really manage from that standpoint.
And for those of you that don't know the proximity of Chestermere, it's like a stone's throw away east of Calgary. So as a matter of fact, the lines have almost blended right now.
We're actually the Calgary border and the Chestermere border actually butt right up against each other. We're just on the east side of Calgary.
Yeah, that's right. So then let's jump over and hear a little bit from Stephen.
Okay. Let's see. I'm a second generation railroader. When I worked for Canadian National Railways, and in my prior life before I retired, I was the senior financial partner for the Canadian National Railways for their Eastern region. So I know a thing or two about budgeting, long-term planning, capital assets, strategic planning. And a railway, very much like a city, is responsible for its own infrastructure. So used to that, to long-range planning, to all of those types of things. When I came to Chestermere, I moved to Chestermere in 2017. I'd moved around all throughout my career and even my childhood. So I came to Chestermere, and I figured it was going to be like pretty much every other city that I've lived in across this country. And I've lived in pretty much every province. When I got here, it was one of the few things I didn't look into was the political past of Chestermere. When I moved here, the people are really nice. It's a nice community. You're right against Calgary, so you have access to all of the hospitals, the airport, all of those things, all the benefits. Benefits of a big city without having to live in a big city. So
like mirror.
Then when I got to know that my neighbors started to, they get to know me and what I had done. They asked me to start looking into these things, some of these things in the past. Like Blaine had said, like there was a petition with 5,500 signatures for the utility company. Some of the problems in the past. And Chestermere, what I was surprised was Chestermere does have a very checkered past of issues. In 2000, it was about 2,000 people. Now it's close to 30,000 people. We went through things with forced land sales around the lake. There's been very questionable land deals, road infrastructure being built, sewer infrastructure being built, massive project over expenditures. The utility company, as Blaine had indicated, which was water, sewer, and garbage collection. And people were very concerned. So they asked me to look at the information. I did look at the information, and I go, they had a right to be concerned. They just didn't necessarily know how to articulate it. It was very clear that the utility company was spun out of the city incorrectly. When they spun it out, the utility company should have gone with its assets and the future equity, because the assets were contributed to the city as the builders built the infrastructure. So in its first life cycle, it's free. But the city didn't pass off the equity. They just passed off the assets, the bills, collectibles, the receivables, and in turn took back share value for that. So they kept the equity. That creates an imbalance for the utility company because they don't have the funding, the equity funding, or the revenue reserves to offset amortization in the future rate. So then it starts to show as a loss. And then as a loss, then the utility company raises its rates because you have to make money, you have to break even at least. Part of the issue too was when we had that 5,500 signatures, the council at the time, we only found out much later, they modified the shareholders agreement that put a gag order on everything that went on in the utility company. So you could not talk to the public, you could not even talk to staff about it. Which are very questionable habits. And residents at the time were quite upset because the board members on the utility company were being compensated. They had their own CAO, which had a very lucrative plan and bonus agreements. All of these things in most other municipalities are part of the municipality itself, right? And the municipality must have a managed balanced budget. The revenues and expenses have to balance to zero. Here, as a utility company, they're basically skirt all the MGA rules. Now you can have political appointees on the positions being compensated. The utility company on its own is not required to follow the same rules and be as transparent. When we were first elected, we had issues on the utility company and questions. We were told, we can't give you that information. We said, well, aren't we the shareholder? And they said, yeah, you're the shareholder, but you're not the board. So we had to have a council meeting to appoint ourselves to the board. When we get to the board meeting, before we get any information, they say, here's these confidentiality agreements that we must all sign. We say, we're not signing this. We campaigned on transparency and providing answers to our residents. And our concern was really to understand what went wrong in the past and how do you prevent it from happening in the future? right? If prior councils made decisions based on the best information they had at the time, because that information was focused or limited or misleading, then they still did the best that they could with the information they had available. It was up to us to figure out why those decisions got made and how could we change it in the future so that it doesn't happen again. Because you always inherit whatever somebody else had done before in the past. We inherited the utility company. Part of the reason for the utility company being spun out was to actually acquire more debt. Under the MGA, the municipality has a debt limit, which is 1.5 times your revenues, right? Once the city had spent significant funds, had significant debt, right? And by spinning it out into the utility company, it no longer belongs to the city directly because the city only has share values in the utility company. So it creates room for the city to borrow more money. When the city borrows more money, usually the people responsible for it are the taxpayers, right? They're going to, if there's no other source to get the money back, the taxpayers are going to be left on the hook. And I think that's a problem, as we look at things federally and provincially, right? With the spending patterns that are there. Now, I guess one of the things I would say too is when I was with the railway before, my father's railway was the Crown Corporation of CN. And when I first started, it was a Crown Corporation. But probably in the late 80s, early 90s, CN was privatized. So it was sold off by the government. And it had to go from the worst performing railway in North America to the best performing railway in North America. Because there were some real life lessons that had to be taught about shareholder value to actually put a return, to spend money effectively and efficiently, right? Because prior to that, it was like any other government organization. If you don't spend the money, you're going to lose the money. It was run really sloppily, and you need to question the narrative and question the processes. We had processes where we had, train crews switching in yards, and we would have 8 crews. They would all work 2 hours a day and go home for the day. We would then question the process. And then we could find out, well, we didn't need 8 crews switching that. We only needed 3 crews switching it, which saved the people, the locomotives, the fuel, all of those types of things. And that's how you gain efficiencies. And you should have efficiencies and economies of scale as you grow. Now, Chestermere.
If you don't mind, Stephen, I'm just going to interrupt you. Obviously, Blaine and Stephen, you guys have a wealth of experience in terms of engineering and business, versus most people that get involved with politics may not have that extra little bit of knowledge. You guys got in as counselors, and of course, Jeff will be coming in. He's got a very similar story. And you were able to pick up on a lot of the stuff that has gone amiss, which would be, just in terms of spending, or maybe where that money might come from, or excess government spending. And kudos to you guys for being in that position in order to do that. And my question to you is, has that spun off and actually been detrimental to you guys? Because you didn't follow status quo. Like everybody should have, there shouldn't have been any questions about the utilities company, shouldn't be questions about any land. So maybe there's a bit of a story, even just telling us about some of the problems that you found, other than maybe just in the utilities as well.
Okay, one of the issues we found when we first got elected, because we campaigned on transparency. Like none of us were the type to actually want to get involved in this. Like I have a good pension. I did not need this. I was retired. I could be quite happy, but I felt obliged to help my fellow residents. And because we were open to hearing from people, we had found out that the city had issued or sold land around the lake. They bought it from the Western Irrigation District, sold it to the residents that own property around the lake. Okay. Now, in that case, some residents couldn't afford to do it. The city came in, demolished their docks, and put a 6-foot fence between them, the back of their house and the lake.
Yeah. Did you say they sold it land to them?
Yeah.
How do you sell land?
Well, the city bought the land from the Western Irrigation District for about $4.5 million, Then it basically subdivided the land illegally, because you can't not subdivide land without road access, and there's no road access to the portions of the land. Then they went around and they said to all of the owners of the lake that you basically have to buy this land, right? Or your docks and everything will be destroyed, and the city will put a fence around it.
So the city actually set the price of the land. It wasn't negotiated or anything like that. They actually set the price.
Right. So we found out from residents, because they said, what are you talking about? And they explained it to us, and they sent us the documentation, and they send us a picture of the fence. And we're sort of going, so here you have a piece of land that belongs to the city that they basically expropriated. They have to cut the grass on it, which means they have to put the lawnmower in a boat, go over the lake to the land to cut the grass. Doesn't generate anything. And when we started asking more and more questions, because these land sales ranged from 15,000 to like 200,000, is some people were actually given mortgages, and other people paid up front, and some people couldn't. This lady that had contacted us, her husband had a heart attack that year, and they had some financial distress. They couldn't deal with it that year. They tried to deal with it the following year, and the city increased the price 300%. Then they've been dealing with this for like the last 10 years. So they were saying, their kids grew up, they couldn't use the access to the lake. As people came by, they're asking the questions. And there was never any desire to resolve the issue. When we started asking questions, it was very difficult to get any answers from the administrative staff. And then finally, you could go onto land titles. You could see what had happened. There's public records, right? Then we got, there's 19 mortgages that were handed out to people. Sorry to interrupt. When you say handed out, who wrote the mortgages? The city. The city wrote the mortgages for individuals.
So the city extended a mortgage to individuals?
Yes, which is against the MGA. You're not allowed. The city can do that for a nonprofit, in which case we have one nonprofit, which is the Yacht Club, which it was done for, but not to individuals. And then you start to ask the questions of, well, if the city was doing this because they thought it was the right thing to do, then why, for certain people, were they not extended that same offer? Right. And instead, their docks are destroyed, and the city comes in and puts up a 6-foot chain link fence on the back.
Did the council ever go back through and look at council meeting transcripts or anything and find if motions were passed to do that or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, what we actually found afterwards was the city actually had to do a write down of it, because the lawyer that they used in the transaction was embezzling money from the city. So the lawyer was disbarred. The Law Society paid a partial claim, and the city was out money and had to take a write-off for the difference.
Jeez. We have an embezzler here too.
Yeah. So,
but at the same time, they did make a profit off of the sale of the land that they purchased from the WID. Basically, they middlemaned and brokered a deal for land that they never should have been in the middle of.
So where was the Minister of Municipalities at this point?
At this point, I don't think it was ever raised to the minister. We were probably the first group that raised it.
Yeah.
It just kind of flew under the radar.
Yeah. And, in the financial statements, there's a comment made, but it's sort of, the wording is drafted to sort of represent, well, this only really talks about the Yacht Club, which is the one nonprofit, which is not really entirely, they're not being very transparent or forthright in those comments. Right. So we had instances like that. Then we talk about the utility. Blaine mentioned about the property taxes going up like 300%. Then we have a lift station. This was a lift station that pumps the sewage, the raw sewage, back to the city of Calgary. Started off, it was supposed to be $8 million, ended up costing $24 million. It operates at 4% capacity. Yeah. We can't even turn on the pump because the pump can do, I think it's, Jeff will know for sure,
450 liters per second.
Right? And we only produce 50. So even if when the city's fully built out, if there was a house on every piece of property that was there, right, we would use 12%.
Yeah.
The city has to pay $1 million a year to pump oxygen in that line because of the gases to avoid those pipelines exploding.
Yeah.
Right. So you go, how did that ever happen?
So if our viewers are now kind of scratching their head going, is this happening in Chestermere? Is this happening in my own town? Because it's quite possible it is. And with that, I'm actually going to bring, what do we call it? Former mayor, removed mayor, Jeff Colvin.
RM.
There you go.
Right.
Removed mayor.
Yes.
How are you, Jeff?
Good, thank you.
See
Thank you for having me.
So we did a little bit of an intro from Blaine and Stephen, and of course, kind of spoke a little bit about what was happening in Chestermere and some of the problems that we've obviously identified already, including utilities. Let's back up a little bit. Describe, basically, just tell a little bit about yourself, and then describe how you got into running for mayor, and then what happened the very first day you were in. In the mayor's seat.
That's a fun story. Well, thank you very much for letting us on tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Jeff Colvin. So I was the mayor from 2021, October 18th to December 4th, 2023. So just over 2 years. Mm-hmm. And in that time frame, we accomplished a lot with the city, actually, in restructuring and making it more efficient and reducing taxes, but we also found a lot of corruption. I have been in Chestermere. I lived in Chestermere now for about 25 years, so quite long. I'm getting old, I'm from Alberta. My great family's from Alberta as well since about 1905. So it's Alberta's our home for sure, and it's very shocking that. I was just looking to give back to my community. Mm-hmm. I'm semi-retired now, and that's what I was kind of looking to do. And my background and what I was looking to help with was infrastructure. And so my background is development of raw land. So you've got your farmland, and you actually take it to a full-on community where you've got houses and parks and sidewalks and street lamps and underground services and stormwater and storm sewers, water treatment plants, sewer treatment plants, all of those kinds of things that happen in cities. That's the kind of thing that I was involved in, as well as I was involved in commercial development, office buildings, as well as warehousing, as well as condominium buildings, home construction.
So definitely on paper, you are like the perfect mayor. Right, because really that's
for certain aspects. I mean, it's definitely a team approach, though, and that's one of the things that we push back on is that given the experience we've all had, and most of our councillors that were successful in running had a ton of experience. Yeah. We're talking 20, 25, 30 years of experience, and that's really beneficial. You've made your mistakes, you've learned the hard way. And now you're trying to, help your community, hopefully not make as many mistakes as when you're learning. And then that's what I was looking to give back. And I was really fortunate that these gentlemen that are with me tonight, as well as Councillor Fote, were agreeable or determined to run at the same time. And so, and that we were successful. And our approach it's not rocket science. It's just a business approach and not wasting money. I found that taxpayers' money is very, very not much respect for it from the cities and the staff, and that was really disappointing. Like I admit, when I was on the outside looking in, I didn't have very much interest in government either. I had a lot of apathy towards government, and I didn't think anything I would say or do would really affect much. Mm-hmm. And then what happened is that we had some issues in Chestermere where we had
some major construction projects that were potentially coming. Yeah. And I had tried to, I had offered my services for free to the current mayor, who's the ex-mayor at that now, Marshall Chalmers, and the CAO, Bernie Morton. And I tried to help them with, there were some pipeline projects that were being done for around the south end of Chestermere and back up to the east side. Yeah. And they were being pushed at about $200 million. And I thought they were kidding when they were talking about that, because it's only about a 2.5 mile kind of distance. Mm-hmm. And I said that, unless you're putting in gold pipes, that's just not possible to spend that kind of money in that short a distance. And because I'd laid pipe, a lot of pipe, under roads, under highways, in serious V ditches with, 2 levels of piping. So sewer and water pipes in the same ditch. So, these things are technical, and they're expensive, but they're nowhere near that kind of money. You're typically spending about $1 million a mile. Mm-hmm. And so, I just went to help them out. And what was shocking when I went to talk to them, and this was before I decided to run for election, is I thought the construction companies were taking advantage of them. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to help. I wanted to say, be careful. These guys, they'll take advantage of you. And I've seen it. And it happened to me when I was with my development company. And what was surprising is that when I started talking to them, they weren't as shocked as I expected them to be about how they're getting ripped off, and how they haven't been shown even simple solutions about, using that flexible pipe that everybody sees, wrapped up in its orange pipe or yellow pipe. And instead of these massive pipelines these guys were talking about, and just run that under the highway over to the east side. Mm-hmm. And they weren't shocked at all about the price tags. They weren't concerned. I really started to, question what was going on, because I would have thought that spending taxpayers' money, that kind of dollar amount, is a massive undertaking. Mm-hmm. And, they weren't shocked and upset about the fact that they were potentially getting ripped off. And so I decided from that point to consider running. And then what made my mind up was there was a gal that was, who was an ex-counselor who was running for mayor, and she just didn't have the level of background and experience that I felt was needed in that position. Never mind, council. So I decided to run, and I ran late. I ran in August for a October 18th election. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty late, and that's not a great plan by me. But I still was successful in getting about 65% of the vote. So that spoke pretty highly of the fact that the public said, we've been taken advantage of for a long time, and we believe that our taxes are too high. But I think a lot of people say that, but we just aren't seeing the proper spending and respect for the taxpayers that we should be seeing. And in Chestermere, unfortunately, we had approximately a 300% increase in taxes between 2011 and 2014. Mm-hmm. Now, some of that was due to education tax going up, but a lot of it was the tax increase. And you've got some naysayers that say, oh, that was just a readjustment of the mill rate. And it's like, guys, you don't know what you're talking about. So what's important is that in the year they started, they had a $300,000 surplus. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if you want to adjust property values and you want to figure out that your mill rates aren't quite correct for the different properties you have, that's okay. But you don't need to get a windfall on the backs of your taxpayers. Mm-hmm. You can redesign your system. So if you think your system doesn't have the correct inputs, you redesign it, you restructure it, and then you should still be budgeting for that same $300,000 surplus. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not what happened. They started doubling the budgets, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, this is on the backs of taxpayers. And what was really unfortunate at that time was some of my neighbors, which had lived in Chestermere and on the lake in Chestermere for, 30 or 40 years, couldn't afford the taxes, and so they had to leave. And I said, that is so wrong. When is the road paid for? When does a person who's a senior and on fixed income and isn't in their prime earning income years, and you're tripling their taxes, and what stops that from happening again? Yeah.
One of the things I do want to point out for our viewers too, we talked about proximity of where Chestermere is in relation to Calgary. You could call it a bedroom community, but I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it is primarily residential. There's a very small business area, right? And so most of the tax dollars that are coming in are residential. Versus if you're in a city, there's a down core that offsets a lot of the, we'll call it infrastructure costs, etc. But in Chestermere, no, it is primarily residential driven, is it not?
Well, and that's correct. The tax base in Chestermere is 95% residential,
There you go.
so that's almost irresponsible.
Yeah.
Okay, because your proper, and this is what's frustrating, is that your proper levels are around 60% commercial should be your tax base, and so when we got in, that was some of the things we wanted to test.
I was going to say, is there a reason why that is? That, like, I know there was a hotel there, and since then you now no longer have a hotel in Chestermere.
Yeah. So what the numbers are that what they considered a successful city to try and focus its economics and finance around was that you wanted to have 60% commercial tax base, and the reason for that is that commercial taxes return the city more of a profit. Residential taxes and residential people cost the city money.
Okay.
And so if you bring in $1 of residential tax, typically you'd spend about $1.20. And the reason you spend is because people are more complicated than a building. And so we bring social services, we bring police issues, we bring bylaw issues, we bring all of these expenses because people, have their challenges. And now on the commercial side, their interest is, hey, is the road plowed? And can I get my truck through? That's all I care about. And so there's not a lot of crime in the commercial side. You occasionally can, of course, but in the residential side, you've got the domestic issues, you've got breaking into people's homes. That's where they see the value and possibly less security, I guess, systems than the commercial do have. But on the commercial side, you spend about 30 cents and you make about 70 cents. And so we were very aware of this narrative. And when we came in, we had a couple ideas and some of those ideas where I wanted to start to understand municipal expenditures and really understand how efficient they were with their money, how efficient they were with all the divisions and the staff, and how they accomplished the goals. And really, it's really the product that the city produces, which is, how they plow roads, how they cut grass in parks, how they deliver their services, pick up garbage, and how can they do all these things, better than whatever they're doing, or are they doing it the best they can, and it can't be improved? And so that was part of our analysis. And it's one of the things that I find that's important, and this is really good about our council, is that we always question the narrative. So anytime somebody comes and tells us something, it's like, okay, now let's dig into that. And where is that coming from? And so this idea that I just told you that residential taxes that you're spending about $1.20 on every dollar of taxation that comes in. So we wanted to push that narrative. And what we found, even though that's the basis for all municipalities across Canada, what we found is we were extremely more efficient than that. And we pushed hard on that. And that's why we were able to cut taxes over 30% in the first 2 years. And what's exciting about that is that you're changing the norm, and you're making it so that cities can actually be self-sustaining and self-sufficient at a much lower tax rate, which I think is important because people are getting really frustrated, and the cost of living and existence is going so high right now. And it's just important for us to do our part, because one of the things with cities is that we find that we're never, ever efficient. And it's like, well, where is the economies of scale? A city is a perfect animal for economies of scale because we grow by 3,000 or 4,000 people a year. So that's actually exceptional because we've got a model that allows us to use our trucks more efficiently, or use our grass cutters more efficiently, or and we should be coming up with incredible opportunities for creating efficiency. And that's where we found that when we came in to office the very first day, my office was crystal clean. And so, we were gung-ho, we're ready to do our thing. And we come in there ready to dig into, files or something all around. And there wasn't a file in my office. And so it was like, well, what did the mayor do here? Like, I don't understand. There's no electronic files. Everything had been deleted. All the emails, everything.
That's so bizarre.
It is so bizarre because where's the continuity of service? Like, it's not my company. It's not his company. It's the citizens' company.
Yeah.
And so this continuity, like, I assume he had a project that he was working on, or something was in the middle of something, because they don't all happen overnight, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was monstrously disappointing that there was no work to jump into, and that we were very passionate about helping the city out, and that was really disappointing for that. And it kind of fed the narrative that when we were running, we were concerned about potential corruption and silly business that had been going on with the city for some time. It wasn't just the past council; it was councils before that. Mm-hmm. But it fed that narrative of, my gosh, what are they trying to hide? Like, what is going on? And when we kept looking for how do we move forward, how do we step forward, and we started talking to the staff and started talking to the senior staff, and we ended up removing the CAO that had been there for the previous council, mostly because he was blocking the previous council from getting information. and obviously that's not what he's there for. He's not there to be a gatekeeper. He's there to encourage the information to get out to council. Mm-hmm. So we had removed him because he was blocking information. And what was surprising is that most of the senior staff was also trying to block us from getting information, which is massively disappointing. Mm-hmm. Because we were very full of energy, trying to say, we're really here to help this city, and we want to see, what does that mean? And we want to offer more recreation, more programming. How do we become more efficient? Use all of our expertise and whatnot to get there. Yeah. And that just didn't go that way. And I wanted to show you, if I could, when we first got in there, we went to an orientation, and the orientation is supposed to start describing what you're, not only the various departments, but also the financial aspects, because the city is obviously a monstrously financial animal. Uh-huh. And our budget in Chestermere, as small as it is, which is about 30,000 people, our budget was $50 million. So it's quite shocking that, you've got that big of a budget, and yet it seems that you don't have a lot of focus around who's running for council. Mm-hmm. And how are you picking your councillors? And and they, unfortunately, they just don't pick them by resumes. It's a popularity contest or something, and it's disappointing because people wonder why their municipalities are in such bad shape. Mm-hmm. Would you ever hire a person for a $50 million budget company without looking at his resume or her resume? I mean, of course you would. I mean, of course you need to hire extreme professionals with skills in companies that are, that large. Never mind, look at some of these other cities. I mean, my gosh, they're monsters compared to us. But if you wanted me to show you, I can show you the budget that we were handed when we first got in there, and it was very shocking to us because, again, we came in. Do you want me to share it with you?
Yeah, if you know how to work on that, pressing present down at the bottom there.
I do. I'm just going to share my screen.
Yeah, if it's easier that way, by all means, yeah.
Hopefully it gives me the choice to share. Okay, there it is.
Okay. And then here you go. Add that to the stage. There you go.
So you can see it?
Yeah. It's a big slide.
So this was the presentation. I added the 25% increase of the city's broken the picture of the guy with no money. But this is the presentation we were given in council that said the city of Chestermere 2022 budget. Now this was given to us December 21, 2021.
Okay.
And we were told, this was the budget that we were told, and it's a bit hard to read here. So we present this in our speeches that we've been asked to go to different cities around Alberta. Yeah. And what you're noticing is the part that's the red line. And so over here, you're looking at the budget that we were asked to accept was this budget at $55 million.
Okay.
And yet the budget that was the year before was $49 million.
Yeah.
And then actuals had come in at just approximately $50 million.
Okay.
So they were asking us to do a $5 million. They were asking us to do a $5 million increase in taxes.
Okay.
Who's they?
They, that being the current administration. Now, this budget had been approved by the previous council.
Okay.
That had been that was in the last, before we got in.
Was that Mayor Chalmers or
Mayor Chalmers? Yeah, and I'll show you here in a second that they had experience at how to lose money and how it's really, and it really shows you how badly a city can be run financially. Because if you don't watch the money, it'll go. Mm-hmm. It'll go fast as it comes in, because what was really shocking, as I think I said already, the staff have a lot of apathy towards taxpayers. Mm-hmm. And that was shocking to me anyways, because I expected them to respect taxpayers' money more. And so this $5 million represented I'll just skip through this, but it represented a 25% increase in taxes.
Yeah.
And so what happened is that, so in this presentation that we show people, we show that in 2020, the city of Chestermere put out all these press releases saying that Chestermere's cutting their budget for 2%, 2% again. It's been 3 years in a row that Chestermere's cutting their taxes. Mm-hmm. It's incredible how well they're doing. And these are quotes that they had in the papers through CTV, CBC, Airdrie City View, just saying all this crap about how they're doing so good and they found efficiencies and they've reviewed numerous expenditures and all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, why is it crap? Okay, so this is just some more newspapers that they spread their crap in. And so when we took up municipal affairs to court, unfortunately, the minister, which is Minister McIver, Rick McIver, would not sign an affidavit. Mm-hmm. And we had asked him to sign the affidavit, just like I signed the affidavit. I could have gotten my secretary to sign the affidavit. Mm-hmm. But what does that accomplish? Because we want to get to brass tacks as fast as possible. We don't want to waste any time. So, he would never sign his name so we could actually get him under oath. But what they did do is they had to present something. And so they presented this. And so what this shows in the second line here is that they showed that their deficits are shown for all 4 years with a consistent negative trend. This deficit increased by 56% from 2017 to 2020. And in 2020 alone, they lost $7 million. Now, that's not on the capital budget. That's not because you had some road blow up or some treatment plant fall apart or something that was unexpected, which is fine if it does. But this is on the operations budget. So this is pure misspending. And so this is massively disappointing. And so this is why when we're brought in is that they said, my gosh, we're in a tough financial position. And we need to raise taxes $5 million and equivalent of 25%. And this was their financials that they had shown as well, which shows the 2020 deficit. And that's really what's surprising is, how quickly taxpayers can get on the hook for everything. Mm-hmm. And you can see this was a complaint by some citizens about potential fraud and corruption amongst council and administration in 2020. The same year they lost $7 million. And so, what does Rick McIver do, right? They don't do anything. They don't investigate. They don't start an inspection. So just so you're aware, I can stop sharing right now. Just so you're aware, the inspection got called on us. The review started in the first 2 months of us being elected. The formal inspection happened just after the review. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, that we got a new title, I guess. We're first at a lot of things. So we're the first city in the entire province's history to have an inspection called that fast.
Well, how fast was it from when you were? Because the report says it was like 8 months or something.
No, it actually the report does show it's in January of 2022. They were elected in October 21st or whatever of 2020.
Yeah, 2021. Yeah.
No, the report, but I'm talking about the investigation. The investigation was 190 some odd days, wasn't
it? No. So the inspection document is their official investigations, but
Yeah.
but it's an inspection document. So that lasted from, they did a review initially, which started in the first 2 months, and then from that point it lasted to December, I think 9th of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right, Stephen?
Yeah.
So
Yes,
the
yeah.
review that must have been initiated prior to Minister McIver taking over that portfolio. That would have been Schultz that's initiated.
No,
that, or not?
So Minister McIver was the Minister of Municipal Affairs before we were elected. And then what happened is that he then moved to help with the Calgary hockey rink deal negotiation, and Minister Schultz stepped in. And then Minister Schultz stepped out and McIver came back.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So that's the order of events. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this inspection was started. When we first got in, we went to a conference called the AUMA, which I believe that was in the end of November of 2021 or middle of November 2021. When we were there, we had been presenting municipal affairs with evidence and concerns of corruption and irregularities that we were finding. And at that time, we believed that our job was to simply, if there was something that came across our desk, then we would pass it on to the authorities, which is pass it on to municipal affairs. And so what was shocking is that everything we passed on to them, they didn't care. They didn't want any more information. They didn't want any details. And what ended up happening is that, as I said, Rick McIver started pestering us. And we were like, what is going on? We just got here.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do our council meetings, like they're official, but when we do our council meetings, we have a CAO. Now the CAO we had in the beginning was we had let go, and we had an interim CAO who had 30 years experience. His name was Harry Harker. And so when we're running these council meetings, we have the experienced CAOs, we have legislative services managers or directors, which run the council meetings themselves. And then we also have legal counsel.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of these people are very experienced. Now, us are not experienced in municipal affairs. So we just got in. Okay. Well, this was the first time that I'd been in government at all. And so, when you're in your council meetings, you're following their advice, and mostly their advice is around how you present a motion properly, how you word a motion, how to follow certain protocols and whatnot. And it's honestly not that hard, but you use the people for their advice. I mean, it's a good team, right? And so we didn't find any challenges with doing that. So we were quite surprised that Rick McIver was coming forward, saying that just general concern about, how council meetings might be being run or whatnot. And we were like, what are you talking about? We get legal opinions for everything we do. And we have all these people telling us how to do things that have been more experienced than we do. So we just didn't see the issue that they were talking about. And we always have a vote, of course. And the vote is always a democratic process. Majority wins. And in the beginning, we might have had, I think we had a 98% unanimous rate, 98.5. So most of the stuff that we were doing was agreed to by all of our council. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't really, much of an issue there. We had a field house project that was a $40 million indoor soccer field that I had been involved with construction of one about 4 years earlier. And it had been built for about $7.5 million. And so I brought that contract and all of the phone numbers for the owners and the construction company and everything in detail to the previous council. And when I gave it to them, nobody was interested in looking at it except for Councillor Fote. And I said, guys, this is for $7.5 million. The one you're building is 40. Yeah. Shouldn't you be concerned? Take a look, take a peek, like have a phone call. And I said, you don't have to go with me. You can go call them up and go tour yourself. I don't care. But so it was really discerning that, these are your stewards of your taxpayers' money. And we had already looked at their financials and whatnot, as everybody can. And there was no extra money for this $40 million. It was all debt. And what was surprising is the city had tried to say incorrectly that they were getting grants and they were getting all this stuff. And it was a total lie. It was all debt. And we're a big proponent of the developers need to pay their way. My background in development, people, some of the naysayers were like, "Oh, you're friends of the developers. You're going to give them, some kind of a break or something like that." And it's like, no, you're not friends of developers.
And that's definitely a concern that I had heard. Like, it doesn't matter if it was you guys in council or right across the board. When Chris and I were talking about having you guys on, and we always think about as a show production, what are we going to call the show? So of course we ended up coming up with Government's Accountability and Transparency, which to me is a very boring title, because I wanted to actually call it Corruption in Government. Really? Right? Because I think everyone expects that there's a certain amount of corruption, but we just don't know to what extent. And I think even if, and I'm not saying this to slam the story, because I'm just taking it as face value. Even if 10% of what you're saying is true, there is enough here that we should be saying we need to be looking at this from every city, every town in Alberta. And I know Chris has a couple of things that he probably wants to say about that as well.
Well, just one thing that I'm kind of unclear about is you pointed out some interesting things that could lead to someone to believe something's wrong, but there's no allegation there. Like, what is when you get right down to it, what is the issue that you thought you were looking at here?
Well, again, I mean, there's so many topics, so we can go through them one at a time and explain it to you. So, what you're concerned about is initially are you getting value for your money? Cities are a commercial operation, so the things do cost money. That is true, and you want to buy good quality, et cetera, et cetera. But really, what it came down to was there was a lot of things that didn't make sense when you're having these conversations with people, and that really starts triggering your spidey senses. So when we were talking about this field house, again, the mayor and the CAO, none of them wanted to even consider looking at anything else. And you're like, and that was very concerning, because you don't have to believe me. Go talk to them, and then go kick some butt with your contractor or your construction company and say, come on, like, how is this possible that we could build a field house for $10 million and you're charging us 40? Okay, just because you have some glass on the front or some rock on the front or some pretty facade doesn't change the cost of things that much. That's what we were trying to say. So we terminated that when we got in. But so here's one of the things that gets you going. So one of the gals that was running, she was an ex-counselor, and so she was on the steering committee for this field house. So during the election, there was a thing called a forum where we did our speeches. She came up and she told the public that if we terminate the contract, because we ran on very openly that this should be terminated, it's way too much money. She came out and said, if we terminate the contract, we're going to be sued, and it's going to cost us more than the construction of the building. And you're like, what?
That doesn't make sense.
That doesn't even make any sense. What are you talking about? The construction cost includes material. It's not just labor. So are they going to sue us for their labor? Okay. Yeah. But so this is the kind of garbage. It's like, what are you guys trying to spin here? And it turns out that the city had no liability because they didn't even have the main construction contract actually filled out or authorized yet. The city launched a fake groundbreaking ceremony where they didn't even own the land yet, and they didn't even have the land subdivided yet. It was a much bigger parcel. And so all of these things translate into, what are you doing? Is this your first time? And remember, it's not the councillors that are doing this. This is supposed to be the city's engineers, the city's planners, the city, that's the workers, right? Yeah. So these kinds of mistakes don't happen. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that in construction. You've got your act together and you are moving forward in a very succinct manner. Yeah. You're spending $40 million.
So who would benefit from that? Like, what is the benefit to anybody undertaking construction that costs 10 times or 7 times as much as a similar construction?
Well, so what the issue is, so I had this happen to me when I was in construction. I had a senior vice president of mine work with a trade of mine, and they basically had a kickback scheme. So they came to me and indicated that something needed to be upgraded, and we needed to spend another $14 million. And I said, are you kidding? I said, we've budgeted this entire project around, all the engineering that was done, everything was done, paid for, planned. And this is not cheap stuff. I mean, this is a $100 million development. And they came back with this thing. And I, of course I pushed back and they both said it's absolutely needed. So anyways, 2 years later, I find out that it was all a scam and it was a kickback that my vice president had gotten kickback from this construction company. And it was just massively disappointing. And the problem is that anywhere there's a pool of money, people always are attracted to it because they want to try and siphon off something. It's that simple. And so if you when the city is managing a pool of wealth, which is the taxpayers' money, and they are also the person that decides where it goes, that's a problem. Okay, when you can invest it and you can say that you're the guy making the decision and what it goes into, and you're the guy on that end too. Like when we organize the design and we pick who it goes to, that's a very risky position. And so what we did when we got in, because of this concern of what I had experienced, is we stopped all construction projects in the city of Chestermere that the city was leading. You can't do that forever, okay? But what you do is you then start looking at, okay, how is the request for proposals done? How are the quotes done? How is the design done? And who's involved? How much light is there on, this whole process? And that's where we started finding out that, there wasn't a lot. It was a lot of secrecy, and quite frankly, when you're doing a lot of secrecy, you don't get the best advice, okay? Because the best advice is from a team, and the team has all the experience. And so what we found is that we had projects like Stephen mentioned, the Lift Station 13, which came in at $8 million and ended up being $24 million. And so it was so badly designed that we're only using 4% of its capacity. Well, that's never supposed to happen. A utility does not run well at 4%. They need to be 60, 70, 80%. They can be phased, that you're going to add a phase to it or something.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, of course you can. And that's the way a normal person, you don't have to be a rocket science, a normal person would go, our city's going to grow at this expected rate. Let's compartmentalize this and let's move it modularly.
Yeah.
And that's what a normal person would have done. So we were going to start a lawsuit actually against the engineering firm that did that, so that we could get the entire story, because they didn't do it accidentally. It didn't happen. And I'm sure they didn't do it without it being told to do it.
Yeah.
So you've got to get to the bottom of all of these irregular things. So for example, we had a stretch of road that was 2.5 miles. Here we go again. And a road costs around $1.5 million. This was only a 2-lane road, so it's pretty cheap compared to a highway. $1.5 million every mile. Okay, so this thing was 2.5 miles. So you'd think you're looking at, okay, what's that? $1.5 million, $1.5 million, $3 million, $4 million, $4.5 million.
Yeah.
Well, it came in at 18. Now there was some pipelines that were put in the ground, but one of the things that was really shocking is after they were finished, I took a drive down it. Now I was just a normal citizen. I took a drive down it and I looked to the left and I go, there's a curb here. This is a rural road. Okay. There's fields on all sides. There's ditches on all sides. There's combines going by, right? You don't put in a curb in the middle of nowhere, right? And the reason that's significant, as soon as you put in a curb, now runoff can't run off. So now it has to go into an underground storm system. You have to have storm grates. You have to have all this piping underground to manage this. And it's like, what are you doing? This road is in its infancy. So it's going to be expanded. It's going to turn from this 2-lane little crappy road into a 4-lane, into a 6-lane. Well, guess what? Everything's going to be dug up. So why would you put in this kind of a thing?
Would the CAO have signed off on that?
Oh, 100%. So would council. But see, the problem with council, though, is that if your CAO is not disclosing everything to you, you get shown some pretty drawings that have some lines on them. And are you going to go, oh, that means it's a curb?
Yeah.
No, you're not going to know. You're not going to know.
That's why the experience of your particular group here makes sense to me. right? And I know you have 100 other stories because I've actually heard the other 100 stories on all the other podcasts that I frequently listen to. Jason Levine, Sean Newman, all these names that I know our listeners are well adversed with. So here's the big question, though. So it sounds like you guys were doing stuff correctly. Then what went sideways? What basically brought Rick McIver in to say, no, you guys can't do that, and I'm turfing you? What's your story on that?
Well, I can let the other guys chat in a second, but as soon as we started looking into things, that's when stuff started to go sideways. And we weren't only looking into the past and whatnot. We had stuff come across our desk that, anytime you're paying attention, anytime your eyes are open, you see stuff come across your desk and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Who did that? What is that about? We had a developer come to us with a kickback scheme on a bridge of $6 million. And he brought us a foot worth of paperwork, and he said he was not involved, but he was a part of it, in the sense that the city actually told him that he didn't have to pay more than $4 million for the bridge. And he said, well, that's good, because there's 4 quotes saying it should cost between 3.7 and $4 million. Why are you guys all of a sudden ramping the price up to $10 million? What are you doing? And they said, don't worry about it. The city will take out debt. And he's like, well, I worry about it. So you give me a piece of paper that says I'm never going to be liable for more than 4. Yeah. Okay, fine. And they said, here's your piece of paper. Get out of here. And he went and talked to the construction company after they were constructing. And he said, so what's your contract? And they said, 3.7. You know it. It was quoted. And he's like, yeah, I thought so. And so that's the problem, is that the city can really do something really easy by going after debt. Okay, it's in a city, it's extreme. It's impossible to steal money. You're not going to take. There's no suitcases of money in the basement or anything like that, and you're not going to write yourself a check for $1 million to your bank account, obviously, because to be honest with you, cities really don't do checks anymore. It's all electronic funds transfers because it's batch payables, right? And so it just doesn't work like that. But the problem is that if you really wanted to cover stuff up, you go and borrow the money. And you pay for it later. Who pays for it? The construction, the developers pay for it in what's called offsite levies. Now, as I was explaining, just for a second, when I was explaining that we want to open up the construction process and we want to shine more light on it, which is why we stopped the construction process for Chestermere, is we said, number one, if the developers are benefiting from this, they have to pay. If they need it or touch it or affect it, they got to pay. And then what we found out was, after we started asking the staff about that budget that was $5 million more that they wanted to spend, is we said, guys, kind of start explaining us these numbers. How do you get here? How do you get to these things? And then they started talking about, some of it was construction stuff. And we're like, but that's for the developer. Why are you doing that? Oh, well, we'll charge them offsite levies. When? Oh, it'll be 2 years from now. Or I'm like, so you're going to bank the developer for 2 years. Are you making 20, 30% a year? Nope. And we're not banking them. Okay, you replace yourself with that developer, and let's borrow your $100,000, and we'll pay you maybe in 2 years. Are you agreeable to that? And of course they said no. So this was the point we said, is that we've got to stop paying for developer stuff. Now, what does that do? Okay, there's 2 objectives there. It brings the developers into the equation. Okay, they've got nothing but expertise. And their goal is obviously to spend less. Our experts make sure the product is quality, okay, which is important. You want to make sure you're getting good stuff. But you want the developers' bench strength, because they're using the biggest engineering firms, the biggest planning firms. They've got them all because they've got lots of money. Well, we get to use them and we don't pay for them. That's pretty cool. Like, why not? And they design the most efficient stuff. But the biggest thing is that we don't bank them. But by not banking them, we're not tying up the city's cash flow. Well, holy cow, there's $2, $3, $4, $5, $6, $10 million, per project that we're not tying up. Yeah. And that's where you stop having the corruption then. And you would never have that situation that I just told you about on the bridge. That would never be able to happen, because the developer would be paying for it up front and we wouldn't be involved.
Yeah. I I totally agree with you. And again, you guys are coming at it from a business point of view.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like the issue that Rick and company came in after you guys was because you weren't following certain protocols that were done, or at least alluded to through the government. And I'm not quite sure. Chris has a little bit more knowledge, I think, in terms of that from the report that the McIver report. But it seems to me there may have just been a bit of a disconnect. Like, you guys are saying this is the way it should be done from a business point of view, but yet from a government point of view, it doesn't apply.
So,
Honestly, Kerry,
sorry, I got to get this in before I forget.
Forgets it.
I forget lots. I've already forgot. No, I'm just kidding. So I get that a city should run like a business. Now, in my business, if I have interactions or dealings with vendors or customers and I'm having issues with them, I don't go to a governing body or someone to deal with it. I deal with it in my business. So you guys are saying that you brought this to the attention of municipal affairs and you went through what you assumed was the proper channel. Why not just deal with these things in council through bylaws and resolutions and things like that on your own, rather than going to municipal affairs? Was there some reason why you chose that path?
Well, the only reason we went to municipal affairs was because it was corruption or criminal. And so you're reporting the crime. So in council, I don't know what really council would have to do with something they found in the past, right? So we would report it to the government, and some things we reported to the RCMP, for example.
Okay. But what was the crime? Like, there's a crime has to have a perpetrator and an action.
Yeah. So for example, when we were looking at, let's just talk about our utility company. Okay, so our utility company is called CUI. They changed the name to a numbered company, and then they told everybody they closed it down, and they didn't. So in that company, they rolled it out, I think, in 2012, and they rolled it out incorrectly or on purposely the way they did it. And so when you're rolling out a company that has assets, you're rolling out the entire company. Okay, which makes sense. You're rolling out the assets, you're rolling out the equity, you're rolling out the debt, whatever makes up that asset, that company, right? You just roll it all out, get over there. Oddly enough, the city, it did not roll out the whole thing. It rolled out the assets and it rolled out the debt. It did not roll out the equity. And so you're like, well, what does that mean? What does that do? So what we found is that there was a real discrepancy between the amount of money the utility was making. Okay, so we found when we stopped, I'll have to get into some of these other things, but when we stopped the creative accounting that the city was doing, we found that the utility was making money. And we said, okay, good. Now we can reduce the utility rates, but because the utility can't lose money, but it doesn't need to be making profit. Okay, it needs to definitely break even and have savings and put money away. And so that's one of the things that we said is that, well, how come our financials show that it's losing money? And so we started looking at the financials. And honestly, I didn't catch it initially. Stephen did. And because what was wrong with it was that when you look at your financial statements for a company, you have something called depreciation on your expenses side. And on the revenue side, you'll call it deferred revenue or equity, whatever. Those are non-cash transactions. So you and I don't give a crap about those because we just want to know how much money do I got in the bank and how much is CRA going to take. That's all I care about. And you don't pay attention to depreciation and whatnot. And who cares? What is it? What does it mean? And so you never paid attention to it. However, in the city situation, they only had one side of that transaction. And you're like, whoa. Those are non-cash transactions, which mean they're supposed to balance each other out. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, if you don't have the equity component or the deferred revenue, and you only have the expense, you're artificially increasing your expenses. So you're saying that, hey, we made $1 million. Nope, your depreciation was $2 million. You lost $1 million. What?
So where would the benefit in doing that come in?
Exactly. So what you end up getting is you end up getting more money to the utility. Okay, and you're like, well, okay, that's not a.
Well, the utility did that.
Yeah. So the utility did that. Yeah. So the utility is able to take more money than it deserves from the citizens. Okay, because every time they have a loss, they then go back to the citizens and they go, "Hey guys, how you doing? We're going to raise rates again."
Oh yeah, yeah.
How you doing? And we'll take those rates, and now we've got them. And they say, because here, see, we've got a loss. And everybody goes, okay, I guess. I mean, a utility can't lose money. I mean, how could you lose money on a utility? You have to break even.
So for if people don't understand that, just look on your power bill and you'll notice that we're still paying off $1.3 billion of loss that the Orange government put us in a few years back. So that's to put it in perspective, we're paying the same thing provincially right now.
Yeah, and I'll let Stephen explain it, but it's so important that this happens properly, because like you're saying, they're big numbers, and you go, God, I hope you guys are being honest with this, because I have no clue. Okay, I guess I'm paying more. And I'll ask Stephen to talk about, because what we found was not only did they have this extra money they shouldn't have had, what they also had was something called a restricted surplus account. That's right. Which allows them to create transactions. And you're like, no way, that's not true. And it allows them to make transactions, which CRA in the private sector would never let you do that. Let me create a fake transaction so I don't pay tax. Yeah, right.
Do you know if every town does that, or every
single one has restricted surpluses? Yeah. And,
so basically, and the scariest, it's like a slush fund. Really?
It is. But the scariest thing about it, because everybody you'd think, well, it's a savings account. That's good. Everybody can have savings accounts. The scariest thing is they can manipulate the financial statements. That's wrong.
Yeah.
Secondly, the oversight. Council did not have oversight over those monies.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
And then when they put it into the restricted surplus account, guess what? It goes from the cash account to the asset account on your balance sheet. Yeah. Well, you as a citizen, how are you going to have a clue what that means? Because if you look at an asset account on a city, holy cow, it's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, because it's roads, pipelines, infrastructure, and all that. And you go, I don't know what that means. Whatever. It's a lot of money. Yeah, you bet. Yeah. And meanwhile, they're siphoning all these little pieces out into this unparented account. Yeah. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
No oversight? What? And just so you know the volume, one of our accounts was $10 million.
Yeah.
And Stephen, I'll let you just explain it a bit more, because it's still shocking to me this day that we stopped that. Like, that was one of the first things we said. You're done with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I guess one of the first things we did when they presented us with a budget that wanted $5 million more of expenses, we kind of said, yeah, we'd like to understand that a little bit better, and we'd like to see the actuals from prior years. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we noticed is when councils were being presented budgets, they were being presented certain snippets saying, well, these are the variable things that you can change, right? When really in a budget, you should be able to look at all of it. You should understand exactly where you're spending your money. Yeah. What we found was huge amounts of budgeted funds moving into and out of restricted surplus accounts amongst all the various functions. And as soon as it gets put in the budget, then they never have to come back to council again to get permission, because it's a budgeted item. Huh. So one of the first things we did is we noticed that people would, if they had a project that was $400,000, they spent $100,000. They wanted to protect that money for future years. They would go off and they would charge the $300,000 that they didn't spend to their expenses and put it in the restricted surplus account. Wow. And then next year they would come back to the council and say, "Oh, I didn't get the job done. I need another $300,000."
And especially with the new council, there's no continuity, so of course they would come back and ask for that.
So one of the very first things that we did is we removed all the restricted surplus budget lines. We either putting money to or from. Yeah. Said, hey, if you want to do this, you need to come to council to get a council's opinion or authority to do so. Right? It's worthwhile to set aside money. If you have gains for a future year in a regular business, it would be retained earnings. Yeah. You would set off your retained earnings aside and you would use it to fund something to benefit the community down the road or reduce hard times in the future. Mm-hmm. But by just allowing it to be there in huge amounts of funding, and it all really goes back to the difference between public sector accounting versus if you're in the real world. If you're in the real world, you're taxable. The CRA will never let you do that. Yeah. You can book expenses under an accrual basis and revenues, but there's a high documentation trail that's required in order to meet that. The CRCA would have to allow for those expenses.
Yeah.
And in the business world, we all remember companies like Enron and things like that cheated and went over the line. And governments put into effect what they call SOX controls, or Sarbanes-Oxley controls, which makes the CFO and the presidents of the company liable. They could end up doing jail time if they don't enforce that those rules are covered.
Or falling out of a helicopter.
Yeah. And all those rules, they deal with, how do you deal with procurement? How do you deal with inventory? How do you deal with revenues? How do you recognize them? What are the expenses?
Yeah.
And they have to be signed off and followed on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of not publicly traded companies, but a lot of nonprofits and private companies follow the same rules because it offers transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? And the government knows how to do it, but none of those rules apply to government. And the government are non-taxable entities. Even our utility company was non-taxable entity.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be following public sector accounting rules, or
That's right.
it was the International Financial Reporting Standards in our utility company.
Yeah.
Right. But then to learn that our utility company had restricted surplus accounts authorized by their board. Well, where in International Financial Reporting Standards does the ability to artificially change your numbers, your revenues or expense numbers, ever exist?
And you're right. And I know.
Sorry,
I'm just interrupting here because I know we're looking at time here. There's so much of this story, right? And even in some of the other podcasts that I watched, you guys kind of uncovered another little nugget out there about there's no standardized accounting between municipalities. And to me, that's another flag that says, okay, if I'm dealing with Chestermere, I'm dealing with this. But if I'm dealing with another municipality, I'm dealing with Okotoks as an example, which you guys have brought up before. It's a completely different set. And so maybe just talk about that for another minute or two. And just because there is this stuff, as far as I'm concerned, if our goal is to basically say, you know what, we're looking at Alberta as being its own entity, getting away from the federal government, we need to kind of get rid of all this other crap that can be coming in from different governments, and we need to standardize. And to me, this is a big red flag that we need to standardize our accounting right across the board.
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Well, and what's so scary about that is that why would you not want standardized accounting? We went to municipal affairs and asked them that they should standardize accounting, and they said not going to happen.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
We're like, what?
I'll tell you why.
Talking about
very
why would
bold.
you want to do that?
It's because the people that have very deep pockets that help to get people elected benefit tremendously from the system the way it is.
Yeah.
And when you when you rock the boat, those people start to get a little bit nervous. Mm-hmm. And what we've been seeing the last few years is the boat has been rocked by a lot of people because a lot of people who would never have noticed anything or paid attention are starting to look around and realize what's going on. So I'm actually seeing two distinctly different conversations here. Mm-hmm. And the first one is now full disclosure, Jeff, I came into this conversation after reading the ministerial report and the reasons for decision and all those things. And I thought, you know what? It looks like these guys may have just not been able to follow the cookie cutter rules that the minister set out, which may have occurred. I mean, there's some things, I think you had even talked about this in one of your previous things. There's some things that you guys didn't do according to the book in your pursuit of the truth, right? Not saying that you deserve to have this happen to you or anything like that, but there's these stupid little technical boxes that didn't get ticked. So there's this conversation about what
Chris,
you're uncovering. What's that?
That's not true. That's not true. No, we followed the rules all the time. This is a favorite narrative of Rick McIver. It's like him saying that the tri-CAO model isn't allowed. Mm-hmm. And then we start showing, well, under section 205 of the MGA, it says one or more people can carry out the role of the CAO.
I saw that. So then didn't Schultz ask for a review on it, right? Like she wanted to report, how is it working? Is it working? Is it benefiting? Is it not? Whatever, right?
You're talking about the directives.
Yes.
Yeah. So they asked for a review on that. And so we did that. but so the point is though is that Rick McIver likes to say things because you, the public, don't know about what the answer is. And then we can't get on the media fast enough like he can, and the media blocks us. And so this is like for example, like he said, Mel Fogt should have resigned himself after he didn't vote in a council meeting because section 184 or 174 of the MGA says that he has to vote. And it's true. The MGA says in section 174, a councillor must vote unless there's a pecuniary interest or conflict of interest. He must vote. But what they don't say, and what you have no clue to ask, is in what situation can a person not vote? Well, in section 184 of the MGA, in a public hearing, if a person does not have to be present for the entire period, and Mel had been on electronics, and he was traveling, so he was trying to tune into it. But Rick McIver does not tell you that. He doesn't tell you that it's during a public hearing, which specifically says he's allowed to not be there the whole time and not vote. So this is the problem, is that he comes out and he says he says one sentence when it's actually three. And that's what gets quite frustrating very quickly, because we do nothing but follow the rules. Because how hard is it?
Yeah,
it's an MGA book that's literally 700 pages because it's 6 inches by 8 inches.
Yeah.
If it was a full sheet paper, it'd be 200. And out of those 200 pages, you only need to know 40.
Well, and I think the other thing, Jeff, is, being business people, we all understand businesses have rules to operate under.
Totally.
So we would follow the rules. We read the MGA on what is required for CAOs, right? We followed those rules. We looked at what are the problems, we questioned the narrative, and we came up with a solution. The same thing as the common one is the council had a whole list of issues that they wanted to work on. We went to council, we came out of in camera, and we had a public session, and we authorized the mayor and administration to work on all of these various projects. And all of these various projects tend to be, the things that municipal affairs are sort of like, I don't want you really working on that, because if you're successful and you manage to lower taxes and you manage to get increased efficiencies and stuff like that, other cities are going to have to follow course, right? And they don't want that. Meanwhile, at the same time, we have our 3 councillors that are working against us, writing municipal affairs, writing to our bank, writing to our IT company, writing to our auditors, all doing things without council authority. Now, they're aware of all of that, but they don't, in the inspection report, they never indicate, these councillors were doing all of these things outside of council's authority. But then they'll come back.
They don't, but they mention the other side.
Yeah, they mention the other side, and they try to tear down the fact of when we provided proof. Like, we have letters from the councillors to municipal affairs that basically say outright lies. Then we've provided municipal affairs with the actual motions, the video in council, that the same people who lied to municipal affairs said that this never happened, made the motion and voted along with the motion. But none of that ever makes the report.
Yeah. So
the reason I brought up sorry, go ahead, Blaine.
Yeah. The whole report, when you read it, you have to be very cognizant of the fact that every statement in it is opinion and never backed up with evidence of wrongdoing. If you read other reports, if you look at other cities or counties or municipalities that had reviews done, the reviews are very short, and it has a statement of what was wrong with the MGA reference of where it was done wrong.
Yeah.
Pass or fail. We never got that. From the inspection, from the review, they moved into the inspection. We were provided a draft report, and we sent back letters and evidence of what is not correct. We were told that everything that we show that isn't correct would be corrected in the final report. None of that information was ever actually incorporated into the report and presented to citizens. So that report has zero evidence of wrongdoing. and it's all lies and or opinion.
Well, and that's why when we first got the report, and we had to provide feedback, I think by December the 9th or something. And we provided all of that feedback. We were never asked a clarifying question, anything about our feedback. It's just like it went to deaf ears. We even wondered whether they even read it.
Yeah.
Right. When the final report came out in March, it was identical to the draft report that was given to us beforehand. Not a single thing has changed. They came and spoke to us in council an hour beforehand and told us we had no place at the public presentation and we would not be allowed to speak in defense of ourselves. Right? And throughout all of the various meetings before, we were not given an opportunity to speak. We were given an opportunity to be dressed down by the provincial government, by Rick MacIver, without any opportunity to speak or say anything. And then what's really sad is, is the residents' rights. The residents have the constitutional right to vote for who they best think would represent their interests. Right? They voted for us. And now to have one individual come forward and say, oh, you voted wrong. Right?
Well, I will correct you there. So constitutionally, there is no constitutional right to vote in a municipal election. That only exists through active legislation, but we vote for those people who enact that legislation. Yeah. But I understand what you're saying. But the reason I brought this up is because I just want you to know, Jeff, that I was kind of on the others, leaning towards the other side, that, you guys messed up and found yourselves in a world of hurt. But here's the but. I want to have these conversations and find out the truth about a lot of this stuff, because we only ever hear one side.
Yeah.
The vast majority of public in Alberta only heard one side about my stand against the government, that I was some anti-mask, anti-vax freak who just wanted to make a bunch of money by being open. And that wasn't true. The other side of the story was 150,000 pages long. Yeah. Now, in hearing you guys talk about these things, I'm well aware that we have some serious problems, and there's some real dinks who are benefiting tremendously off of the allowable corruption that only continues to happen because people don't get involved. So I really appreciate what you're doing, what all of you are doing, because I really understand what it feels like to be on the wrong side of the government, because it seems like it's unwinnable. But I think the reason I said there's two distinct things here is because I think we need to continue this and go through that report. I'd like to give you guys the opportunity to go reason by reason, line by line through that report, give your take on it, whatever you want to do. It's going to take a lot longer, of course. But then also, I really want to dig into these things that you guys uncovered, because in the back of all of those conversations, like, oh, this bridge was supposed to cost this much money, and the budget was over twice as much. I want to know who benefits. Where is that money going? Who are the people involved? And why is anybody in a position of elected authority willing to stick their necks out to protect them? Because that's a pretty big deal, right? So I think there's a lot more conversation here that has to happen.
And it's actually really funny, because when Blaine and Stephen first logged in, they said, "Oh, we've been on this show already, because we've been called back on so many shows," and it was like, no, this is the first time. And the reason is because you guys have spread yourself out there, which is amazing, to talk to everybody, and everybody wants you back for a second show, because we're now hearing the stories. And that's what I was saying, is that, if you wanted to hear even more of the stories, go look at another podcast. We wanted to try and just kind of focus on the reason why you guys were removed. And my own benefit is, what is the solution for this in the end? What can we do to make government more accountable, to make it more transparent? And it sounds like you guys were trying to do that, and yet you were blocked at every corner. And you were basically said, no, this is not going to happen. And then the government came in through various ways, created this report. And again, Jeff, I'm not sure, I guess you went through municipal affairs like we were talking about earlier. Why did you go through that? Did you talk to other mayors about what the protocols were? Did you approach your MLA Chantal DeJong? I'm not quite sure exactly what your relationship was with her at the time. Certainly because she came in later, and with Leela not being there. Yeah.
Municipal affairs is the right route, but the problem that we didn't realize at the time was that Rick McIver was the brother-in-law to the ex-mayor of Chestermere.
Yes. And
so some of the allegations that we were looking into involved the previous council.
Okay.
And so that started turning the tide against us very quickly. And what we found, like, for example, when we were in office about a week, no, I'd say 3 weeks, and the CAO, the interim CAO, came to us and asked us if he could pay out some hush money.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, no. Anyway,
what? Like legitimate hush, not legitimate, illegitimate, be quiet, here's some money?
Yeah. So that's what we said, is we said, I think I understand what you're saying. You want to pay somebody out to be quiet about something that's happened in the city. And I said, we ran on a platform of exposing corruption and transparency. So you want us the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks we're in here, you want us to wipe it under the carpet and actually pay to get rid of it? Like, what are you thinking? Like, and this was the three of us. So this was Councillor Hanley, myself, and Councillor Fote that were in the room with this CAO, and this was Harry Harker. And why we can talk about it so openly is we started a lawsuit against this guy, totally public. You can pull it up and whatnot. This was against the CFO, ex-CFO, the ex-director of HR, the IT manager, and this CAO. So we found out that after he was fired I'd say about 2 weeks later, because this was over Christmas, so we didn't want to let him go over Christmas. And then we found out about 5 days after we let him go that he paid out $600,000 to two people. This ex-CFO who had resigned before he paid her out. Like, she doesn't deserve any severance. She had no massive severance contract or something stupid like that. There's no rational explanation for this at all, okay? And when we found out, I then presented that to Rick McIver, and I said, oh my God, this is what's happened. I wanted to self-report. And then we also went to the RCMP about theft, and you name it, they didn't do anything. We started a lawsuit against these guys. As soon as we were let go, that was one of the first things Rick McIver canceled and terminated, was that lawsuit against them to get them to talk. And how, one thing to understand is that Rick McIver, during our tenure, stopped 3 investigations into corruption, collusion with our 3 rogue councillors that had been doing all this crazy stuff, as well as the RCMP, as well as McIver and Deputy Sandberg in conjunction with the RCMP and them. All of these investigations were stopped by Rick McIver. The first one that we released to the public, September 27th, 2022, within 20 hours of us releasing that to the public, he brought in an order to bring in Doug Legore, the official administrator, and the first thing he did was terminate that investigation. It's how much more biased could it get? It was about him.
Yeah.
And so,
Jeff, have you ever watched House of Cards?
Yeah, I've watched a little bit of it. I know I get referenced that all the time. I need to watch more of it, I guess. But it's terrible, the stuff that we've uncovered. Like, if you remember in the inspection report that you read, it indicated in there that the mayor signed the 2 checks for $600,000.
Yeah.
Okay. On the evidence there, if you want to show it, or I can just talk about it. So we told Minister McIver, as soon as we found out that they paid, oh my God, somebody stole $600,000 of the city's money. That's total crime, theft, everything under the sun. We presented him with all of the evidence. So we gave him a copy of our bank statement, of course, that showed it was electronically funds transfers, EFTs. We also gave him a copy of our general ledger, which showed it was a EFT, electronic funds transfers, and who it was paid to, and of course, and all of that kind of stuff. So how is it that Rick McIver and the inspector get it wrong in the inspection report? Not once, twice. The draft was wrong and the final was wrong. The evidence showed 100% that it was an electronic funds transfer, not a check, and there's no blank check at the end of the bank statement. And I don't have the codes to do manual payroll entries. It doesn't get done by the mayor. So, it just goes to show you, unfortunately, Chris, how corrupt is it that we've actually given them the evidence and they completely show contradictory to the public.
Yeah.
And they go and cancel the lawsuit against these guys to recover the $600,000 of taxpayers' money. I mean, that is low-hanging fruit. It can't get any easier.
Are you guys in court at all right now?
Yeah, so we have a judicial review that Rick McIver has come out and said him and the city of Chestermere, Doug Legore, terminated it. And it's like, unfortunately, the public doesn't know a lot about legal, most of them. And so, unfortunately,
having even been in the courtroom, how many times, Chris? Like for various things, even I don't.
Actually, the reason why I brought up the time thing is because I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning every morning. Tomorrow, I'm actually being cross-examined by the Alberta government lawyers. So I have a busy day of all sorts of legal bull.
No kidding.
Stuff tomorrow as well.
So yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So so we have a judicial review, and the government is 4 months in breach of a court order to release the evidence that led to our removal.
Yeah.
Like, you think when you're going to remove a council completely, democracy and the votes and all that kind of crap, you'd have your stuff organized as to why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they also had a legal opinion.
That's what I've
about.
Sorry, go ahead.
They asked their lawyer for a legal opinion on how to remove a council.
Yeah.
And the lawyer told them, you shouldn't do it. But if you're going to, here's all the steps that are laid out. Now, that letter to them was October 10th.
No, I believe, it was November 8th, 2021, just days after we were elected.
Or sorry, November 8th. So,
and that's the same day our 3 road councillors with our city lawyer started their whole little plot of, writing to municipal affairs. That was the feedback and advice, basically following the letter from Brown Lee that
getting legal advice on how to remove a council. Yeah.
Right?
All the information was laid out to them. This is how it works. Please keep this highly confidential.
Who was the letter from?
Brown Lee.
Our letter was Brown Lee for the government, and then our letter was from Richard Jones, Macmillan Law, to these 3 councillors. And why that's illegal is that the councillors are not allowed to do anything in regards to the city without council's approval. Okay, and the lawyer is not allowed to do anything because he doesn't work for them. He works for the city, so he's in conflict completely. And how is he paying the bill? Is he padding it on another invoice? Well, that's illegal. They've already admitted, dumbly, that they didn't pay for it. And it's like, well, that's fantastic. You just admitted that the lawyer just totally committed a crime.
What makes me is really depressing for me. I've lived in Alberta. I've lived actually near longer than I've lived anywhere else. I've been in Alberta since 2000. And I came from an NDP stronghold of Vancouver Island, and I watched it destroy lives. I literally right in front of my eyes. I remember when I was a teenager, we fought for $6 an hour jobs. Kerry, he's much older. He fought for 30-cent an hour jobs when he was that age, but that's another story. Anyway, my point is, our government isn't perfect. The people that are in it are certainly not perfect. At least they're no more perfect than I am. And I've watched our premier stick her neck out and do some things that I'm really proud of. I'm proud to be an Albertan because our premier is standing up for Alberta. It sucks knowing that these other things are occurring at the same time that are they're staining the good work that other people are doing. And I don't know if politicians think they have to hide things or, they have to maintain the status quo or they can't get anything done. But it is a little bit depressing because there's a lot of people right now, they're looking at this. They're like, oh, there's corruption. Rick McIver's corrupt. This person's corrupt. We need to bring the government down. And I'm thinking, oh, my goodness, the alternative, right? So how do we deal with these things while still getting other important things done for the province?
Honestly, Chris, I believe that as well before I got in. After looking on the inside, I realized it was 10 times more corrupt than I ever thought it was. And then secondly, okay, how can we help it be better? How can we help things get improved? We had 25% less staff. We had increased our production by 300% within the city. We hired experts not just people that were friends of somebody that got promoted through the staff ranks for the last 10 years. We wanted to increase the knowledge level, the efficiency of the city itself, and make it better. And we accomplished that. We reduced taxes by over 30% in 2 years. But it's conscientious approach to something. And I think there's a lot of people that can do that. But the problem is the politicians, though, is that, none of us have been politicians before. We just wanted to give back to our small little town. We didn't plan on taking on the Alberta government or Rick McIver. That was never of any desire in the least. What's frustrating is that Rick McIver knows nothing but trying to take your head off. That's all he tries. He doesn't know how to negotiate, doesn't know how to do anything. I was asked 3 times when we were exposing this corruption, what would I like to make it go away? By 3 government officials.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like, first of all, I don't want anything. Number 2, the city, those people that have committed these crimes, it needs to be investigated, not by me, by a professional, and then it needs to go to court. That's their job. Yeah. Let them determine if people are guilty, and if they're not, God bless them. Let's move on. Yeah. But we have to change. It's not just about convicting people. I mean, if people do something wrong, that's one thing as well. They should be held to account. But number 2, it's about creating better policy. Yeah. You're trying to make it less likely to happen again in the future, whether it's by accident or intentional, or people just took advantage of the system, whatever. You're trying to put in the correct checks and balances to make sure this stuff doesn't happen again, and cities are functioning better, and taxpayers' money is being stretched further. Yeah. That's it.
I don't know if we can have good ideas like that. Do you remember what happened to the guy that invented the car that ran on water?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, me neither.
Exactly. He disappeared. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the 3 of you, if not the 4 of you, because I know Paul isn't here, but you've obviously had a few people that you've disrupted their lives. You've had a 25% reduction in staff, so those people will be upset with you. You've got 30%, is that right? 30% less spending, so that money that going somewhere is upset people. So it's no wonder you've got a group of people out there that actually don't like you, right? But it's a sad state of affairs that's what it takes in order to actually do a good job.
I would offer this perspective as well. You said that, Rick McIver wants to take your head off. I've had conversations with some, you would not believe the people in government that I've had conversations with as a cafe owner. Mm-hmm. We have people in government right now who went in with the best of intentions. And what they have said to me is when they got there, they realized they were facing a bureaucracy that is infinitely more powerful than all the elected officials in this province. Yeah. And what was offered to me was the only way we're going to change any of these things is if we change laws. And that's what some of our legislators want to do. Not all of them. But I would offer perspective that it may not even be the Minister of Municipal Affairs. It may be the deputy minister who's been there for decades.
Oh, definitely is.
Staff and that bureaucracy.
Yeah, the staff, the senior staff at these positions are definitely complicit. Yeah. And that's, massively disappointing. Just massively.
Yeah, I think I agree with your comment in the beginning. It's about solving the problem. And a lot of it has to do with the administration at the provincial level feeding ministers, because the problems are very similar of how a CAO is the gatekeeper of information back to the council. And so they entice them to make whatever decision they think is appropriate. The same thing, I'm sure, happens in the ministries. A lot of people get elected, they get appointed to a ministry, they know nothing about it, but they use the staff underneath them who have their own agenda, right? I think in all businesses, you want to look at best practices, you want to look at better ways. And I think our elected officials, if they were to go through each ministry and do their own review and their own inspection of those, about their processes, what's done to make sure things are done, with natural justice, procedural fairness, that there's business sense, that they're not working at odds with other ministries, then they could actually come up with a better way of doing it. Now, would they upset a lot of, government employees, administrative employees? Probably, right? And I speak from my experience of being part of CN when it was a Crown corporation to becoming a private corporation. Were a lot of people upset about the transition that had to happen? Yes. But was it the right thing to do in the long run? Yes, it was as well.
So I guess interesting.
Just
people don't realize also how much power the ministry has. Sorry, Kerry.
No, that's right.
People don't understand that one piece of legislation could actually end every municipality. One piece of legislation could turn every municipality into an administration appointed by the provincial government.
Yep. Why do you think they want to bring parties into municipality?
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast. But I'm aware of the time. So, and I know, there's a certain attention span that even our viewers have. And so two questions similar, but yet a little bit different. I want to know what's happening in Chestermere right now in terms of politics, in terms of who's in mayor position, yada, yada. That might be able to be answered in 2 minutes. And the last question, of course, because it's a follow-up, is what are you guys hoping to be able to do with this? Are you looking at getting your positions back? And are you looking at running again? So whoever wants to jump into that first.
I'll jump in first. So one of the challenges that the current, at council and administration is Rick McIver took over with putting in Doug Legore into the council. So there's only one person in council, which is obviously exactly what's not supposed to be.
That's right.
There's no debate, there's no discussion, there's no transparency, there's nothing. This guy went as far as to cancel a whole bunch of projects that were underway that made a lot of sense because he didn't understand what they're about because he's not from Chestermere.
No.
And he didn't take the time to understand. He also went in, we put about $17 million in savings. And we had, for a new fire hall, our developers were coming forward because I said to them, council did, we're not banking anything for you anymore. So guess what? If you need a new fire hall because you built all these homes, guess what? You're paying for it right now. So they came to terms and they said, okay, we're paying for it. Well, guess what this guy does? He comes in and he doubles the price on the fire hall. And then he says, don't worry about it. We're going to pay for it. Now I'm sure that he'll collect offsite levies 2 years down the road after they've done their little scheme where they've doubled the price, which is what they did. It's just total crap what these guys have done. And that money was earmarked for a pool and for partial funding for a hockey rink, which is what our city's been trying to do for so damn long. And then this guy comes in and wrecks everything. Like, they have no respect for our community. And this stuff was important to our citizens, right? And so it's very frustrating. Ultimately, I guess moving to your second question is, number one, we'll run again. Number two, I'll run again. Is that Rick McIver and so we've been told that they're trying to figure out a way to not allow us to run. Okay, and somehow remove our names from the ballot, somehow charge us with whatever they want. And we're not concerned about it because of course we didn't do anything wrong. And we would win in court, but what they would try and do is they would try and tie us up in the meantime, and then we would win 6 months later, or so they drop the charges or something like that. And the problem is that they just don't understand what we're doing here, is that we're going to take them to task. And that's the bottom line. And so they've committed crime. And that's one of the things that we're easily to show. Like I just checked actually just yesterday. We had told people that they had been removing videos and minutes and agenda packages and all this stuff between when we started to December 2022. I just noticed, I think it was yesterday, they started populating it back. And they don't have it all there yet, so you can go and check, and you won't have all the agenda packages and all this kind of stuff there yet. What was interesting is that Rick McIver, October 18th, came to us and started complaining about the mayor doing a bunch of projects that he wasn't authorized to do. And we were like, what are you talking about, Rick? Like, do tell. And he says, you weren't authorized to do it. And he starts saying that you didn't have authorization on this project, this project, this project. And I go, just a second. I recognize those projects. Yeah, that's in our list of 50 things that we approved through council unanimously that the mayor and administration can work on. And he goes, nope, the mayor's not involved. And I'm like, Rick, I've sent to you 10 times, you and the inspector. So it got our spidey senses up a little bit. And when we in our package that we go and talk to people around the province, we show them. It's like, Rick, do you think we're stupid? We downloaded everything about that information. We downloaded the fact that somebody loaded fraudulent minutes onto our website in the wrong location because we had gotten new software that needed passwords that they couldn't load on. Where they loaded it was in our archive pre-2018 area. And guess what? We took screenshots of this stuff. And we showed that we got a 2022 March 15th document in a pre-2018 archive area. And guess what? That document is the fraudulent document that says, oh, the mayor is not involved in the motion anymore. It's just administration. And you're like, oh, well, let's go take a look at the video. Oh, it's not there. Oh, well, we downloaded it. Sorry, Rick. We've got a copy. And in there, we've screenshotted with the picture of all the councillors and the motion that was on the screen. And look what it says. The mayor and administration. And what does it say also verbally? The mayor and administration. What does it say in the agenda package that we approved in the next minutes of the next council meeting? The mayor and administration. And what did the mayor sign? The mayor and administration. So it's like, and so what I noticed in this last, when they repopulated, guess what? It's gone. And now the one that's there for March 15th, 2022 is actually the current one. Well, geez, Rick, where's the fraudulent one? Did you get rid of it? You don't think we've got a copy of this? You don't think we've screenshotted everything? Like, he's going to go down for this massively because he is the one who brought it to our attention. And it's like, Rick, how could you find that? That's a needle in a haystack. We had trouble finding it. And it's like, wow, even though I'd sent you video of the evidence that we had these 50 projects unanimously approved by council and the words and the motions, I sent that to them many times during the inspection because they kept asking about it. And it's like, Rick, you told us during our orientation that we were supposed to get council's permission to do projects. So what did we do? We put a list together of all the projects that we wanted to do, worked them through council, and council passed them that we could do this. You told us to do this. So we followed your advice. What's the problem?
Yeah.
So it just goes.
You think that was Rick himself, or do you think it was just the staffers trying to go ahead and do stuff?
Well, I think they're all involved because I sent this to the inspector. I sent many times, and everything I sent to the inspector, I sent to Rick McIver, I sent to Deputy Minister Gary Sandberg, and I sent to their staff. So we included all these people on these different things. And not only did we just send it as a big report, we sent specific things at a time because they were asking questions and they clarifications. And I did not want to respond just to the inspector because I said, yeah, I know where this is going. I can already tell. And so Rick McIver came out himself in a meeting where he would not let us talk, where he had all of council there and his people would not let us speak. And he came out, and one of the line items that he has, which we have him sending it to us in writing, saying exactly what I'm saying, that the mayor is not allowed to do this list of stuff and this information, which was exactly that motion. And he's referring to the fraudulent motion. And it's like, fantastic, Rick, we've now got you. You've now called out the motion that was fraudulent. Sorry, you've called out the fraudulent motion. That's correct. Fraudulent motion. And I sent you the real motion. And I've talked about it over and over again because you asked us all the goddamn time because we had all this approvals to do this, which you were blown away that we had gone and done it. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, Rick, we're trying to be efficient. You said to do it a certain way, so we went and did it.
Yeah.
And that's what he doesn't like is that, we're logical, so we want to move. So if you say do it this way, we go and do it that way. Fine, done. So anyways, we've got them on that extremely. So we want to take them to court over this stuff because that's fraud. And we found out that the person that had the access to that web area of our city did not have access to our new updated system because her passwords had not been created yet because she was absent. And guess who that person is? That person is the person that went to our director of HR, went to our CAO, and indicated that she's now been offered the position at a $50,000 pay raise, so a bribe, and she's now going to be the director of corporate services, their boss. How do you feel about being my boss, she says to them, And staff members don't usually like that when somebody below them is all of a sudden going to be their boss. So what did they do? They came directly to myself and the CAO, along with the CAO who had been attempted to be bribed, came to us and said, "You would not believe what just happened."
Yeah. There are so many.
Fantastic. Record. Okay,
so
great.
Many tentacles to this story. It's unbelievable. So, but question over to Blaine and Stephen. Would you guys run again, or are you planning on doing that?
Yeah.
I'm planning on running it.
I'm planning on running again. I believe it's up to the residents to decide what.
Yes,
they
when this first broke and there was no recall. Again, we kind of knew there was a recall. We didn't know the process. Blah blah blah. Having gone through the recall with Gondek, and I know it's actually on the Premier's desk to look at the numbers that are needed for a recall. I'm surprised that in theory, this should have gone back to the city and said, look, if there is some issue, then we're going to go through the recall process. And I don't think any of that needs to happen, judging from the story that you guys have just told. So, I know Chris is probably nodding off to sleep. We've got a hell of a day tomorrow, but I'd like to thank you guys for coming out and telling the story. Again, you're all over a whole bunch of social media out there, which is amazing. And thank you so much. Is there anywhere that, does it make sense for people to contact you directly? Do you want people to contact you directly? Because that's another danger in your situation.
Yeah, we have a website that, is just about to be launched. It's called cleanupalberta.ca. We have an email, which is Chestermere4, the number 4 at gmail.com. So cleanupalberta.ca and Chestermere4 at gmail.com. And really, just to close, I guess, the most important thing is this is for the citizens of Chestermere, right? We're not interested in becoming provincial politicians or moving on or anything. We're only interested in our small town, as far as I know, unless somebody's changed their mind. But we only are looking to run this, and we want more recreation for our kids and families, and cleaning up Chestermere. That's really it. And I think the opportunity, like you mentioned about standardized accounting, and there is an AGM coming up for the UCP here in November, I believe, 2024, and that's a good opportunity. You want to follow the rules. We can put forward motions for standardized accounting, for example, new transparency over quoting and procurement and whatnot, to stop developers or make developers fund everything they should, and stop the corruption. We can do those kinds of things. And this kind of thing, I think, is extremely, I think, honestly, one of the biggest things is the tri-CAO model.
Yeah.
That massively increased transparency.
Yeah.
And it's not more expensive because those people are workers. They're not just sitting on a throne. They're workers. So the cost, actually, we found we saved money.
Yeah.
And these are things that, in my opinion, the government should change for the municipalities to do better. And I think it'll help new councillors as well as citizens. If we had standardized accounting, you'd be able to compare just whatever area is important to you of our budgets with other cities that you like or think is doing a good job or whatever. And so would how much
is being spent on each individual in that city. And
exactly. Here's the average, here's the low, here's the high. That would be fantastic to have that kind of information, right? You don't have to be a specialist in finance and accounting to understand and dig in and realize that they try not to even show you everything.
Yeah. Well, again,
I have one final question.
Okay, there we go.
Well, Jeff, do you like hamburgers?
Of course. Alberta beef. You betcha.
Well, I know where there's some good ones.
Yeah. You can head on up to the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mere, Alberta. Just a short 2 hours straight north on Highway 21.
Oh, really? We've been asked to come up to Grand Prairie actually later this week, and we're going up to Thornhill County, I think.
Yeah.
Thornhill County. Yeah. So we're going to be looking in those areas too. And even actually Dawson Creek.
Oh, wow.
Which is a long ways up. And it's really mostly just to show them that here's some things that you can look into. And at the same time, we do have some meetings set up with some of the politicians in the area too. Like when I was the mayor, I had met with mayors all over Alberta, And I would ask them the same thing. Are you guys seeing the kind of corruption that we're seeing? And most of them would say yes. And I said, fantastic. So you guys should, let's get together and let's come out and let's move this. Let's make change. No. And I'm like, what do you mean no? You got to stand up and you got to bring it forward. I'm not getting into that fight.
Yeah, what? It was you go first, and if you're successful.
Yes, that's the typical way of doing things, isn't it? Yeah.
Which is okay. That's what we're here for. Clean up Chestermere, whatever that results in.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time and effort, and I'm pretty sure I'll have a few people come up and talk to me when I'm hosting karaoke on Friday at Dockside Bar and Grill, where I do it every single Friday, and great venue in Chestermere. So if you guys are around, please do come out and say hello, and it'll be an interesting conversation because I'm sure people will have many drinks in their bellies at that point.
Yeah, exactly. No, thank you for your time, guys. It's
thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm gonna sign you.
I wish it had been easy and this is just a load of malarkey, but I think what you guys are doing is important, and I'm willing to help however I can.
Great.
Appreciate that, Chris. Thank you very much.
All right. And with that, I'm going to just log us all off at once because I know Chris has to go to bed, and I've got 1,001 videos to edit tonight. So, all right. Take care.
I've already turned into a pumpkin.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you.